One of the toughest product interview questions are, what should company X build in 5 years? In this video, I'm going to walk you through a foolproof framework and an example to help you tackle this question so you ace your product interviews. So we're actually going to tackle, what should Google build in the next 5 years? And this is tough because Google has built so much. What haven't they touched? So we're going to first start off with talking about Google's business. And what is Google's mission? It is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So some themes that they care about, as you can tell from their mission statement, which I think is pretty unique, is one, they care about organizing the world's information. They care about knowledge. Second, they care about universal accessibility, that as many people can access knowledge, information, whatever they need as much as possible. And you see this through their Next Billion Users effort that they invested in, where they're trying to bring other people in emerging markets, in places where internet is not accessible, bringing the services to them. And the last theme is usefulness. They want to make sure that these products are useful or make a difference in a person's life. So my tip here is, it's really important to actually understand and break out the mission, because you're going to use this to set and maybe develop solutions and a vision for your product, which we'll talk about later on. Next, you want to spend a little bit of time understanding the company's products. So here, again, Google has developed so many products. I'm going to split them out into a couple different domains, from hardware, software, their platform products, and innovation products. For example, on their software products, it's things like video, YouTube, it's things like Google Maps, Gmail, Google Workspace, which is really the Google Docs, Drive pieces of the product. Of course, their key flagship product that they started off with, Google Search, and Ads, which they built search to monetize off of. On their hardware products, they've also built so much in the last decades. They've built the mobile Pixel phone. They've invested in home devices like buying Nest and then developing Google Home, which I have one. They've built a platform by buying a small company that turned into their Android platform. And we all know they have innovated in self-driving cars, being one of the early ones to invest, and in other innovations such as the Verily, which is part of their Alphabet conglomerate. They invested in Google Glass. So they have worked on so much, which makes this question even harder. And lastly, let's look at their business model. Google's business model is so that they make about 80% of their revenue off of ads, whether that's YouTube ads or Google's network ads or directly on Google's search platform. And then the rest of the revenue might be coming from licensing products. For example, they started charging enterprises to use Google Workspace, Gmail, etc. They're also selling a lot of consumer products like the Google Home, but the chunk of their revenue is still coming from ads. And as we know, the advertising space is a bit shaky, given a lot of the regulations that we're seeing on user privacy data. So now that we understand Google's business, let's talk about goals. And this piece is so key to be able to make progress on this question, because this question of what should Google build in the next 5 years is really ambiguous, and you can go in so many different directions that it's almost overwhelming. So you have to narrow it down a bit by asking yourself, for what purpose in the next 5 years? Is it, number one, to diversify its revenues? We talked about Google's revenues is about 80% from ads. Does it need to do a better job of diversifying beyond that and to sell other things, so that if the ads climate comes under more regulation or tight constraint, they are not being threatened? Or two, is the goal something to fight off competition? As we've seen recently with the development of ChatGPT by OpenAI or other contenders, such as people spending so much time on TikTok, does Google need to fight back in some way to protect its territory? I mean, you have seen Google fight back on these initiatives with things like Bard, which they developed, which is supposed to rival ChatGPT. I don't think it's there yet. And also YouTube Shorts, which is supposed to rival TikTok videos. Or is the goal to drive user growth? So are they trying to acquire new users, get engagement from existing users? So that could be another goal. I mean, we saw that Google invested billions of dollars into Next Billion Users, which is to bring their services to those emerging markets that might not have access to internet? Or is their goal to continue innovating? Google is really well known to just push the boundary on spaces like self-driving cars or Google Glass, the internet space with these balloons. And they have so much under their portfolio of Google X that a lot of times they are innovating for innovation's sake. It's not clear in the long term whether they're going to be able to make money, but they know it's really important to push the boundaries because who knows what the next trend is. And they feel confident that whatever they come up with, such as when they started off with search, they would find a way to monetize. So to tackle this question, you really need to understand, well, what is the goal? And here you might ask the interviewer directly whether they have any input, or a lot of the times they're going to put it on you to prioritize what do you think the goal should be. And as always, when you make decisions, start off with the criteria. And here my criteria is which has the highest urgency or which has the highest impact on long-term revenue growth. So if I start to think about these list of 4 things, well, today's climate in tech is a bit weird. As we're talking about in 2023, tech has constricted a bit, where we've seen even companies like Google had to lay off tens of thousands of their employees last year in December. They had to nix their next billion users organization and really cut down on costs, which means they might deprioritize innovation for innovation's sake in the meanwhile, and hence that's going to help me eliminate number 4. And they've had to prioritize things that have more obvious return on investment. Google has also seemed to deprioritize acquiring a lot of new users. As I mentioned, they nixed their next billion users organization, which means I'm going to deprioritize number 3 as well. So that leaves me with number 1 and number 2, diversify revenue and or compete. So I think most important for Google in this climate is to diversify revenue to make sure that they survive. And as you might say, the competitors are taking a piece of Google's lunch and they need to go fight them. But you saw that competition does not necessarily mean a significant threat to Google's survivorship. For example, Google was competing against Facebook as Facebook was becoming the main dominant social media player. And Google had developed a bunch of products to try to rival Facebook. And it did not succeed. So they had tried Google Plus. There was other products in other countries that did better than Google Plus. But despite it not defeating Facebook, it was able to coexist and still make a ton of money from ads revenue. So I might then say, yes, competition is important to push them forward, but beating out these competitors in their own game might not be the most critical to survivorship. So I'm going to prioritize diversifying revenues and keep an eye out for how to also maybe beat their competitors while doing that. Now, the next step, we've now hunkered down on a goal, which is to diversify revenue. We need to know who we're going to be building for in order to determine what we're going to be building. So let's get clear on what are some users that we could focus on. And for Google, I would say the 4 key users that they could be building for, again, these are very general, but the first is enterprises. And these are large organizations, large companies that even though they make up a very small number of total businesses, they make up a chunk of the revenues or GDP of the country. So Google itself would be an example of one of these enterprises. Second would be small, medium businesses who make up the majority, something like 90% of the number of businesses. And this is the case in the US. Third, another type of user they target is the solo entrepreneurs. So think about with YouTube, they're tackling these creators who start off as solo entrepreneurs often, or maybe they are working with someone else in the video. And fourth, they could be focusing on everyday consumers, selling things like Google Nest, Google Home, and whatever other products that we are using as consumers. So the criteria I'm going to use here is to look at 2 things: the potential revenue growth from this group versus the effort. And this is me basically looking at the return on investment. So if I think about these 4 groups and look at the current climate, we're kind of in a recession where there's high inflation, and hence we might expect consumers to be spending less on digital goods. So I might deprioritize consumers. When I think about large enterprises, yes, they generate a ton of revenue and have a ton to spend, but it's also very costly to acquire them. The sales cycles are pretty long. And on top of that, to build for them is costlier because the quality or the expectations they have is going to be at a much higher regard. So now I'm left with the small, medium businesses, or the sole entrepreneurs. And if I look at which group is going to bring a higher amount of potential revenue in the long term, it's going to be the small, medium businesses over the creators. Because when I think about the sole entrepreneurs, they have a lower ceiling as to how much they could be making versus a larger size business. Now that we've identified which users we want to be tackling for, we then want to understand what challenges of theirs that we can build for. So a top tip here is I want you to think about challenges that are big and lofty versus small pain points. And that's why I call this section challenges and not pain points, like some of the product design frameworks that you've seen me use. And that's important because the end solution should be something that's pretty ambitious and not like a feature. So if you narrowed the space and make it a pain point, it becomes too narrow to develop something that becomes a product suite. Again, they are asking what should Google build in the next 5 years. It should be something quite meaty. So if I look to see what are the challenges of small, medium businesses, I have two main categories. The first is more on operations and the second is more on growth. So under operations, some of the big challenges they have, one starts with hiring, and this includes finding the right people, training them, and retaining their employees. I think about my own experience with my parents who started their small, medium business when I was in high school, and their main constraint was finding people to work for them, which meant because it was hard to find people, they had to spend all of their time working. A second effort of these businesses are to digitize their business. As we see technology optimize processes and serve as key things of communication with customers, businesses have been pressured to adopt these technologies that might not be very easy for businesses to do so. A third thing is tracking business performance. So a lot of times businesses don't even understand the number of customers they have, the number of sales they're making, and it's all sort of a mess. And hence, if they don't have the full picture, how are they going to be able to optimize it? And number four, on a similar vein, their financial management is a key challenge. Oftentimes, they don't know how much capital is flowing in and how much capital is flowing out. What are the investments that they're making? And sometimes businesses find themselves in trouble without even realizing it. For example, I remember one of the most famous restaurants when I was in Copenhagen. I will put a link of the name. So apparently, even though they are the most famous and, again, top-rated Michelin star restaurant with a wait list that's basically impossible to get off of because all of the reservations are booked, so despite its popularity, it apparently went out of business, and partially maybe something to do with the cash flow. Now let's talk about the grow part of small, medium businesses challenges. And the first even starts with capital. A lot of times for these small businesses, they might not be able to get access to loans from banks. So how would they grow? The next is talking about marketing and customer acquisition. So a lot of times for these small businesses, they don't know how to market, what to be marketing. They don't even know who their customers are or who should be their target customers. They have quite of a challenge there. And let's say they do find the right customers. Sales growth is a challenge for them. How do they get their existing customers to buy more, to spend more? And the last big challenge for small and medium businesses is competition. So it's so hard for small and medium businesses to compete with these larger companies already. So think about how much corner bodegas and supermarkets and corner shops had to close down with the entrance of something like Walmart. So we have these 8 big challenges, these mega challenges that small and medium businesses are struggling with. Now to move forward to solutioning, we have to figure out which ones are we gonna prioritize. And our criteria is which of them we think businesses are most willing to spend on, and which of them do we think aligns with Google's strength. So if I look at these 8 things, there are a couple that I would deprioritize because if a business is doing well, these might not be the most important things. For example, business digitization and incorporating technologies might not be so important if there's a ton of demand, or things even like tracking business performance or financial management. If a company is doing really well, securing capital and funds to grow might not be as important. So what are the most critical, crucial ones that I think businesses will spend on? It's 1, hiring. At the basis of any company will need employees to make it successful. And this is something business time and time again have expressed frustration in being able to hire the right people, hire in time. And the other 2 that I think align with Google's strengths are the market and customer acquisition component. Of course, Google has already done a fantastic job with its ads platform and helping small and medium businesses show up when people are searching for things. And the other thing that Google could grow into is helping these businesses with sales growth? How does it help these customers build relationship with customers to continue growing, to continue understanding what these customers' needs are? So because Google has already built its ads platform, I'm also going to deprioritize marketing customer acquisition because Google is already working and succeeding and excelling in this space. So that leaves me with hiring and sales growth. And here, as I begin to think about the challenges that I'm prioritizing for Google to build in the next 5 years, my vision is for Google to make it easier to start and scale businesses. So now let's talk about some solutions. And my pro tip here is you want to think in line of a product suite versus features. Again, they're asking you, what could Google build in the next 5 years? You need to think of something bulky. And here, I also don't want you to over-rotate on the most innovative things. So if a common mistake people make is throw in trends like, oh, we should build something for ChatGPT and not give a specific use case on what it could be useful in solving the user's challenges. So let's talk about a couple solutions that Google could work on for the next 5 years. So on the hiring angle, there's a couple of dimensions to look at it. The first is challenging the basis that you even need to hire. So maybe what Google can invest in is building robotics that would assist companies in tasks that would make it easier so the companies don't have to hire as much as needed. Some great examples we're seeing, if you've recently been to Uniqlo in New York City, they have these self-checkout machines that are pretty amazing. There's no scanning. You literally just put the items in a bag in that section and they detect what you bought. And there's one person coming around to manage all the 6 stations of self-checkout machines. So that is kind of hardware. You wouldn't necessarily call that a robot, but just imagine a future where Google is building these small robots to take on tasks. For example, for restaurants, you might build robots that can actually do the cooking. I mean, a lot of cooking is following a recipe, which is pretty algorithmic. So think about maybe giving a robot certain ingredients and giving them a list of what to execute on. And the dish should come out pretty consistent each and every time, and maybe even better than if a chef made it. Don't let Gordon Ramsay know that I just said that. Other examples of where robotics could help is you think about in clothing shops, a lot of work is going in to do things like folding clothes in the back room. Or in grocery shops, a lot of labor is going into stocking shelves. So could we take some of those tasks and have robots aid people in them so that employers would have to hire less? Of course, I know this topic is very controversial, but I'll leave it there as an idea because I think it is pretty powerful. A second thing I think Google could go into is to build a product suite where they use generative AI to assist business employees with accomplishing tasks like marketing. For example, when businesses write marketing material, they have to have a person come in to write the copy. So imagine a world where you take an existing employee, any employee who doesn't have expertise in anything, but being armed with this generative AI, let's say to do marketing, they now don't need to be an expert, but instead could you leverage that expertise and execute off of it to do more general things. So for example, they can use generative AI to find the copy they need to write for marketing, and they can do the things that need less expertise, like putting that copy on certain types of print or a banner, or copying and pasting that copy into an ads platform. So this way it helps small and medium businesses not need to hire for different types of expertise, but have people who are really good at learning, being able to be assisted with expertise to then leave them the easier things to do. A great example I've seen in the space is my friend who definitely is not technical. She has not needed to learn how to code to build something, and instead she's been assisted by ChatGPT to help her come up with code to execute and build this widget. And she basically copy and pasted that code into Python to run things. Well, what could be something for sales growth? Well, one thing for businesses to continue increasing sales from existing customers is to build a relationship with customers. But nowadays, I see so many of these businesses building kind of generic relationships with customers where they're sending generic emails to their customers. That's not really building a relationship. I see a vision of a world where each customer almost has a relationship with the business like they would with a friend. So what could that look like? You can imagine Google maybe investing in things like business messaging. So it already has the Google Maps platform where there's a directory of basically all the businesses in the world. So how does it use that to then maybe create a communication channel between the businesses and customers to develop a long-term relationship so that customers can stay loyal and could feed back into the loop to help businesses understand what products they should be building? So this is only one type of product strategy question that companies are asking. Here's another example of a product strategy question being asked at large companies like Google. For example, should Amazon enter the smartphone market? So check out this video, and I will see you guys in the next video.